The text message from my mother-in-law made my stomach drop. Family emergency meeting, tonight, 7 p.m. sharp, attendance mandatory. 10 years of marriage to Wyatt, and Kylie's messages still had the power to make me feel like that scared 22-year-old girl who first walked into their mansion. I'm Aaliyah, and this is the story of how I went from being the family's supposed gold digger to becoming their unexpected salvation. You don't have to go, Wyatt said, loosening his tie as he walked into our bedroom. My mother's being dramatic again. I set my phone down and met his concerned gaze. When isn't she? But this time feels different. Different how? Just a feeling. I smoothed my blazer, checking my reflection. The young woman who'd once trembled before the mighty Bryants was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone they had no idea existed. Remember our first dinner with them? Wyatt asked, wrapping his arms around my waist. How could I forget? Your mother took one look at my second-hand dress and decided I was after your trust fund. I turned to face him. That prenup was quite the wedding gift. I'm still sorry about that. Don't be. It was the best motivation I've ever received. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Christian. You ready for tonight, boss lady? I smiled, typing back, as ready as I'll ever be. What's Christian saying? Wyatt asked, trying to peek at my screen. I locked my phone quickly. Just checking in. You know how he worries. The drive to his parents' house was tense. Each mile brought back memories. Kylie's snide comments about my background, Luke's condescending financial advice, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. They're going to love what you've done with the charity foundation, Wyatt said, squeezing my hand as we pulled up to the gates. If only he knew. Elisa's car was already parked in the circular driveway. She stood by the entrance, pacing and biting her nails, a habit from childhood that only emerged when something was seriously wrong. Thank God you're here, she said, hurrying toward us. Mom's on a warpath. What's going on? Wyatt asked. I don't know exactly, but Dad's been locked in his study all day, and Mum keeps making these weird calls. We followed her inside. The mansion hadn't changed, still the same oppressive grandeur, still the same portrait of Kylie in her debutante dress dominating the foyer. There you are. Kylie's voice cut through the air like a knife. She stood at the top of the stairs, perfectly coiffed as always. We've been waiting. Luke appeared behind her, his usual confident stance replaced by something more rigid, almost fearful. What's this about, Mum? Wyatt asked as we climbed the stairs. Oh, you'll see. She turned her ice blue eyes on me. We have quite a lot to discuss with your wife. The way she said wife, like it was something dirty, made my blood boil. But I kept my face neutral, years of practice serving me well. We filed into Luke's study. The room smelled of expensive cigars and aged leather, but something was different. The prized art pieces that usually lined the walls were missing. Sit, Kylie commanded, pointing to the chairs arranged before Luke's desk. I took my seat, noting how Elisa chose to stand by the window instead of joining her mother's side. Interesting. We know what you've been doing, Kylie said, placing a folder on the desk between us. Did you really think you could get away with it? Get away with what exactly? I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The transfers, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. Luke spoke for the first time, his voice heavy. We've tracked it all. Wyatt stood up. What are you talking about? Your wife, Kylie spat, has been systematically stealing from this family for years, and we have proof. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound seemed to startle everyone in the room. Something funny about fraud, Aaliyah? Luke demanded. I reached for the folder, flipping it open with steady hands. Inside were transaction records, business filings, and investment reports. They had indeed been tracking something, just not what they thought. You know, I said, closing the folder, for people so concerned about their money, you really should have paid more attention to who's been buying up your company's debt. The color drained from Luke's face. What is she talking about? Wyatt asked, looking between his parents and me. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I think it's time we had a different kind of family meeting, one where we discuss how I'm going to save your empire from collapse. The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw real fear in Kylie's eyes. What do you mean, save our empire? Kylie's perfectly manicured nails dug into the leather of Luke's desk chair. We don't need saving, especially not from you. The missing artwork suggests otherwise, I replied, gesturing to the bare walls. Selling off assets already? Luke slammed his hand on the desk. How dare you? Dad, Elisa interrupted, stepping forward. Is it true? Are we in trouble? The silence that followed was answer enough. Wyatt moved closer to me, his expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. Aaliyah, what's going on? He asked quietly. I pulled out my phone and dialed Christian. Send them in, I said, then ended the call. Send who in? Kylie demanded. My team of financial advisors. They're waiting outside with detailed reports of your company's current position. I met Luke's gaze, including the 3 failed development projects you've been hiding from your board. Luke collapsed into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his 60 years. How did you... No, I finished for him. I've been watching your company for years. The Caribbean resort project that went belly up. The failed tech startup investments. The mounting debt you've been shuffling between subsidiaries. Wyatt's face hardened. Dad, is this true? Before Luke could answer, the study door opened. 3 people in suits entered, carrying tablets and folders. They silently distributed documents to everyone in the room. Page 1 shows your current debt position, I explained, my voice steady. Page 2 shows who holds that debt. Pay particular attention to the highlighted sections. The room fell silent as they read. I watched Kylie's face transform from contempt to horror as she processed the information. This is impossible, she whispered. Mom? Elisa's voice cracked as she looked up from her papers. We're nearly bankrupt? Not nearly, I corrected. You would be, if not for the anonymous investor who's been buying up your debt for the past 3 years. Wyatt's head snapped up. You? I nodded. Remember that prenup you made me sign? The one that specified I couldn't touch any family assets or claim any part of the family business? I allowed myself a small smile. Well, I followed those terms to the letter. I built something of my own instead. The charity foundation, Wyatt said slowly. It wasn't just a charity, was it? The foundation was real enough, but it was just one branch of what I created. I turned to my team. Show them the Artemis Group portfolio. More documents were distributed. I watched as understanding dawned on their faces. 15 billion in assets, I stated clearly. Built from scratch over 10 years. No family money, no connections, just hard work and determination. The same determination you tried to break with your accusations and prenup. Impossible, Kylie repeated, but her voice was weaker now. The woman you dismissed as a gold digger now owns enough of your debt to force a takeover, I continued, but that's not what I want. Luke leaned forward. What do you want? Originally, revenge, to prove you wrong, to show you exactly who you underestimated. I sat down next to Wyatt, taking his hand. But now I want to help. Why would you help us? Kylie demanded, though her usual venom was missing. Because despite everything, I love your son, and because sometimes the best revenge is showing mercy when you could choose destruction. Elisa moved to stand beside me. I've seen the numbers, Mom. We need her help. This is a trick, Kylie insisted, but even she didn't seem to believe it anymore. No tricks, I said firmly. Just business. I have a proposal that will save your company, protect the jobs of thousands of employees, and restore the legacy you're so proud of. But it comes with conditions. What conditions? Luke asked. I stood up, straightening my blazer. First, you'll stop treating me like an outsider trying to steal your fortune. The irony of that should be clear by now. Wyatt squeezed my hand, and I drew strength from his touch. Second, we'll restructure the company leadership. No more hiding failures or cooking books. Everything transparent, everything above board. And third? Luke prompted. Third, I said, looking directly at Kylie. You'll apologize. Not just to me, but to every person you've looked down on, every employee you've belittled, every family member you've manipulated. It's time for things to change. The room fell silent again, broken only by the sound of Kylie's shuddering breath. Take the night to think about it, I said, gathering my things. My team will leave the documents with you. Call me when you're ready to discuss terms. As Wyatt and I turned to leave, Elisa caught my arm. How long have you been planning this? I smiled. Since the day they made me sign that prenup. The drive home was silent until Wyatt pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. 10 years, he said quietly. You built an empire right under my nose for 10 years. I wanted to tell you so many times, I replied, turning to face him. But I needed to do this on my own. Show me, he said suddenly. Show me everything. 20 minutes later, we sat in my home office, a room Wyatt had always assumed was just for my charity work. I logged into my computer and pulled up the Artemis Group's main database. It started small, I explained, clicking through various projects. Remember that tiny consulting firm I started? The one in the spare bedroom of our first apartment? That's the one. Every client taught me something new. Every contract built my network. I pulled up an old photo of me and Christian working late in that cramped bedroom. Christian believed in me when no one else did. Except me, Wyatt interjected. I always believed in you. You did, I acknowledged, but you also let your family convince you I needed to be controlled. He flinched. The prenup, I agreed. Your mother's crowning achievement in protecting the family fortune from the gold-digging nobody. I clicked through more slides, showing the progression of my business. Each success led to bigger opportunities. I reinvested everything. Lived well below our means. Remember how your mother mocked my off-the-rack clothes? While you were secretly building a billion-dollar company. Wyatt shook his head in amazement. A knock at the door interrupted us. Elisa stood there, looking uncertain. I followed you, she admitted. I need to understand. I gestured for her to join us. Perfect timing. I was just showing Wyatt how it all started. Including how our family treated you, she asked quietly. I pulled up another file. Actually, you might be interested in this. Remember 3 years ago when you wanted to start your own fashion line? Elisa's eyes widened. The mysterious investor who backed out at the last minute. Was me, I confirmed. Through a shell company. Your parents had already sabotaged your plans by threatening other potential investors. I couldn't let them know I was involved. But why pull out? Because I saw how they were manipulating you, using the promise of funding to keep you under their control. I met her eyes. You needed to break free on your own terms. Like you did, she whispered. Look at this, Wyatt said, pointing to the screen. The Thompson Development Project, that was you. I nodded. Your father's biggest competitor. When they started struggling, I stepped in, saved 3,000 jobs and turned the company around. While Dad's project failed, Elisa added. Because he refused to listen to his advisors, I explained. His pride cost the company millions. My phone buzzed. A text from Christian. Board members are getting nervous. Luke's been making calls. Your father's trying to rally support, I told them, showing them the message. But he doesn't realize I've spent years building relationships with every major player in his company. What happens now? Wyatt asked. I pulled up one final document. This is my proposal for restructuring the company. New management, new direction, complete transparency. Mom will never accept it, Elisa said. She doesn't have a choice. The company's drowning in debt, and I own most of it. You could destroy them, Wyatt realized. I could, I agreed. One phone call and 10 generations of your family's legacy crumbles. But you won't, Elisa said with certainty. No, I won't, because this was never about destruction. It was about proving my worth. I closed my laptop. And about showing that success doesn't have to come at the cost of others' dignity. Wyatt took my hand. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from them. I didn't need protection, I replied. I needed respect, and now I've earned it. What about the charity foundation? Elisa asked. Was that all just a cover? I smiled, pulling up photos of the education centers we'd built, the scholarships we'd funded. The foundation is very real, because unlike your parents, I believe wealth comes with responsibility. My phone buzzed again. Luke's name appeared on the screen. Ready to face them again? Wyatt asked. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. I've been ready for 10 years. I'm coming with you, Elisa declared. It's time someone stood up to them. As we prepared to leave, I caught my reflection in the window. The scared young bride was gone forever, replaced by someone who had turned rejection into resolve and humiliation into triumph. Let's go show them what real business acumen looks like, I said, leading the way out. The Bryant mansion looked different in the harsh morning light, less intimidating, more like what it really was. A facade, hiding a crumbling foundation. Luke opened the door before we could ring the bell, his face haggard from a sleepless night. The board's revolting, he said without preamble. They're calling for an emergency meeting. I know, I replied, walking past him. I called it. Kylie stood in the study, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her red-rimmed eyes. You've been busy, I observed, noting the empty coffee cups littering the desk. How did we miss this? She demanded. How did we not see you building this empire? Because you were too busy watching me fail, I answered. Every criticism, every snide remark about my clothes, my background, my ambitions. You were so focused on tearing me down that you never noticed me rising. Elisa stepped forward. I found something else, Mom. She placed a folder on the desk. The resort project in Barbados. The one that supposedly failed. It didn't fail at all. Luke's face went pale. Elisa, don't. The project was profitable, she continued, but someone siphoned off the funds. Someone with executive access to the accounts. Wyatt grabbed the folder. Dad, what did you do? What I had to do, Luke exploded. The lifestyle your mother demanded, the image we had to maintain, it all costs money. Money we didn't have, Kylie whispered, sinking into a chair. My phone buzzed, a message from Christian. Board members arriving at HQ. Showtime. We need to go, I announced. The board meeting starts in an hour. To witness our humiliation, Kylie asked bitterly. To save your company, I corrected, unless you'd rather explain to your society friends why you're selling this house. The drive to headquarters was tense. I rode with Wyatt and Elisa, while Luke and Kylie followed in their car. As we pulled into the executive parking garage, I spotted familiar faces gathering. Board members I'd cultivated relationships with over the years, never revealing my true identity. Mrs. Harrison, called out George, the head of the board. I didn't expect to see you here. Actually, I said, extending my hand, it's Mrs. Bryant, but you know me better as the CEO of Artemis Group. His jaw dropped. Around us, other board members whispered and pointed. Shall we begin? I gestured toward the elevator. The boardroom was packed. Luke and Kylie slipped in last, taking seats at the far end of the table. I stood at the head, my presentation ready. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, you're here because this company is in crisis. But what you don't know is that it's been in crisis for years. Slides appeared behind me, showing the true state of the company's finances. Gasps filled the room as the numbers revealed themselves. However, I continued, there's a solution. A merger with Artemis Group would not only save this company, but transform it into something stronger. And who controls Artemis Group? Demanded one board member. I do, I stated clearly. The woman some of you may remember as the gold-digging bride who needed a prenup. The room erupted in murmurs. I caught Kylie shrinking in her seat. My proposal is simple, I continued over the noise. A complete restructuring, new management, transparent operations, and a focus on sustainable growth rather than maintaining appearances. And the current leadership? George asked, glancing at Luke. We'll step down, I answered. Immediately. Luke stood up abruptly. Now wait just a minute. Sit down, Dad, Elisa commanded. You lost the right to protest when you embezzled from your own company. More gasps. Luke collapsed back into his chair. I clicked to the next slide. I've prepared a detailed transition plan. Each of you has a copy in front of you. Take an hour to review it. When we reconvene, we'll vote. As the board members filed out for the break, Kylie approached me. Her hands were shaking. You could have destroyed us, she said quietly. Yes. Why didn't you? I looked at Wyatt, who stood proudly by my side. Because revenge wasn't worth destroying something that could be saved. But make no mistake, the old way of doing things ends today. All those years, she murmured, I thought I was protecting my family from you, but you were actually protecting it from us. The vote will pass, I told her. The board trusts me more than they trust Luke. The only question is whether you'll accept the changes with grace or force me to do this the hard way. She straightened her shoulders, a ghost of her old pride showing through. And if we accept, then we build something better, together. I held out my hand. Your choice. After a long moment, she took it. The vote was unanimous. As board members filed out of the room, Christian slipped in through the side door, tablet in hand. You won't believe what I just found, he said, his face grim. There's more to the story. More than Dad's embezzlement? Elisa asked. Christian placed his tablet on the table, pulling up a series of documents. These were buried deep in the company servers. Someone tried to delete them, but... He smiled. Well, let's just say I'm very good at my job. I leaned forward, scanning the files. My breath caught. Luke, care to explain why there's a second will? Luke's head snapped up. What? Your father's will, I clarified. The one that supposedly left everything to you? Turns out there was another version. One that divided the company equally between you and your sister Margaret. Kylie's face went white. Margaret died 20 years ago. In a car accident, Elisa added, before I was born. Did she? Christian asked, sliding another document across the table. Because according to these bank records, someone's been making regular payments to an account in Toronto under her name. Payments that started right after her death and continued until 3 months ago. The room fell silent. Luke stared at the documents, his hands trembling. What did you do? Kylie whispered. I had no choice, Luke said hoarsely. She was going to ruin everything. She wanted to sell, to break up the company. Our father's legacy. So you forced her out, I finished. Made her disappear, take the money and stay quiet, or else. Wyatt slammed his hand on the table. My God, Dad. Your own sister? She's alive, Elisa asked, tears in her eyes. We have an aunt we never knew about. I pulled out my phone, dialing a number. Margaret? It's Aliyah. Yes, I found them. It's time. The door opened, and a woman walked in. She had Luke's eyes and Elisa's smile, though her hair had gone silver. Luke stumbled backward as if he'd seen a ghost. Hello, little brother, Margaret said quietly. Kylie grabbed the edge of the table for support. All these years. I'm sorry, Kylie, Margaret said. I wanted to reach out so many times, but the agreement Luke made me sign, which is now void, I interjected, along with any claim Luke had to sole ownership of the company. You knew? Luke demanded, turning to me. How long have you known? 3 months, I replied. When the payment stopped, Margaret reached out to Artemis Group for help. Imagine her surprise when she learned who I was. This whole time, Wyatt said, while you were buying up company debt, I was also helping your aunt prepare to reclaim her rightful place, I finished. The board has already approved her appointment as co-chair. Luke lunged forward. You can't... Sit down, Margaret commanded, and surprisingly, he did. You took 20 years of my life, Luke. 20 years away from my family, my home, my legacy. The only reason I'm not pressing charges is because of her. She nodded toward me. Why? Kylie asked me, her voice barely a whisper. Because sometimes healing is better than vengeance, I answered. And because this company needs both strength and compassion to survive. Elisa moved to stand beside her aunt, studying her face. You have Mom's old pictures. The ones that went missing. Margaret smiled, touching her niece's cheek. I took them when I left, to remember the family I lost. The family you can have again, I said firmly, if everyone is willing to move forward. Luke slumped in his chair, defeated. What happens now? Now, Margaret said, we rebuild, together. But first, she turned to Kylie. I believe you owe your daughter-in-law an apology, a real one. Kylie stood slowly, her perfect posture finally cracking. Aaliyah, Take your time, I said. We have plenty of it now. I was wrong, she managed. About everything. You weren't trying to steal from this family. You were trying to save it. From us. From what we'd become. Wyatt took my hand, squeezing it gently. The new board meets tomorrow, I announced. Margaret and I will lead the transition team. Luke, you'll provide a full accounting of all diverted funds. Kylie, you'll help Elisa launch her fashion line, properly this time. And me? Wyatt asked. I smiled. You, my love, get to watch your wife and aunt transform your family's company into something worthy of its name. Margaret picked up the original will, running her fingers over her father's signature. He would have liked you, Aaliyah. You have his spirit. Speaking of spirit, Elisa said, wait until the society papers get hold of this story. They won't, I replied. Some things are better kept in the family. Now, shall we get to work? 3 weeks into the transition, I found Luke waiting in my office before dawn. The security logs showed he'd arrived at 4 a.m. Burning the midnight oil, I asked, setting down my coffee. We need to talk, he said, sliding a folder across my desk. Privately. I opened the folder and immediately recognized the pattern. More hidden accounts, more diverted funds, but these were different. These led to offshore holdings I hadn't discovered. How much, I asked. Enough to sink everything, he replied. Even your merger won't save us if this comes out. I studied his face, noting the calculated desperation in his eyes. What do you want, Luke? A deal, off the books. He leaned forward. I'll make these accounts disappear permanently. In exchange, I keep my position and full voting rights. Blackmailing your way back to power? I closed the folder. Not very original. I'm trying to protect this family. No, I said, standing up. You're trying to protect yourself. Again. The door opened, and Margaret walked in, followed by Wyatt and Elisa. Right on time, I said, handing Margaret the folder. Luke's face went pale. You knew they were coming. I knew you'd try something like this, I replied. The question was when, not if. We've been tracking your movements for days, Wyatt said, his voice hard. Every call, every meeting, every desperate attempt to hide what's left of your schemes. Elisa stepped forward. Did you really think you could outmaneuver her, after everything we've seen? You don't understand, Luke protested. These accounts, if they become public— They already are, Margaret interrupted, turning on the television mounted on the wall. The morning news was running a special report. Breaking, major corporate corruption exposed. Anonymous whistleblower reveals decades of financial fraud. You didn't, Luke whispered. I didn't, I confirmed. You did. Every desperate move you made in the past 3 weeks. We were waiting, watching, documenting. The SEC has everything, Margaret added. Every account, every transaction, every attempt to cover your tracks. Luke lunged for the door, but Wyatt blocked his path. Sit down, Dad. It's over. The reporters will be here in an hour, I said, checking my watch. The board in 2. By noon, the markets will open, and everyone will know. You'll destroy the company, Luke said. Everything I built. Everything you stole, Elisa corrected. From Aunt Margaret, from the shareholders, from all of us. But the company won't be destroyed, I assured him, because while you were plotting this sad little coup, we were preparing. I pulled up the presentation on my laptop. Every major shareholder has been briefed. Every partner has been assured. The merger is proceeding with full transparency, including the exposure of past misdeeds. The stock will tank, he protested. Temporarily, Margaret agreed. And then it will recover, stronger than ever, because for the first time in decades, this company will be run with integrity. A knock at the door. Kylie entered, her face set in grim determination. "The lawyers are here," she announced, "and I've signed the papers." Luke's head snapped up. "What papers?" "Divorce papers," Kylie said quietly. "I won't be dragged down with you, Luke. Not anymore." "Mom," Wyatt breathed. "I've spent 30 years turning a blind eye," Kylie continued, "telling myself it was for the family, for our legacy. But the real legacy is standing right here." She gestured to me. "The woman we tried to keep out is the one who saved us all. Security is waiting downstairs," I said to Luke. "They'll escort you out quietly if you go now. Make a scene, and they'll do it in front of the arriving press." Luke stood slowly, his empire crumbling before his eyes. "You think you've won?" "This was never about winning," I replied. "It was about doing what's right, something you forgot a long time ago." "I'll fight this," he threatened. "No," Margaret said, "you won't. Because if you do, the next documents I release will be about Sarah." Luke went completely still. "You know about Sarah? Your other secret?" Margaret's voice was ice. "Your other family? Yes, we know. So take the quiet exit, Luke, while you still can." As security led him away, I turned to the others. "Ready to face the press?" Wyatt took my hand. "Together." "The way it always should have been," Elisa added. Kylie straightened her shoulders, years of pretense falling away. "Show us how it's done, Aaliyah. Show us how to build something real." I looked at my family. Not the one I married into, but the one we were becoming. "Let's go make history." The elevator dinged, and we could hear the first reporters arriving in the lobby below. It was time to step into the light. The press conference was a circus. Camera flashes exploded as we took our seats at the long table, microphones arranged before us like soldiers standing at attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "thank you for coming. Today marks a new chapter in our company's history." A reporter's hand shot up immediately. "Is it true Luke has been arrested?" "My father," Wyatt answered, his voice steady, "is cooperating with authorities. We'll let the justice system handle that aspect." "Ms. Margaret," another reporter called out, "how does it feel to return after 20 years? Margaret smiled, the cameras catching her grace under pressure. "Like coming home, but more importantly, like being part of something honest and new." "Mrs. Bryant," several voices called out at once. I nodded to a reporter in the front row. "Your rise from supposed gold digger to corporate savior is remarkable. Was this revenge?" "No," I said firmly. "This was restoration, of value, of integrity, and of family." Kylie stepped forward to the microphone, surprising us all. "If I may," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I owe everyone in this room an apology, but especially my daughter-in-law." The room fell silent. 10 years ago, I forced this brilliant woman to sign a prenuptial agreement because I thought she was beneath us. Today, she sits here having saved not just our company, but our family's soul. Cameras clicked frantically as Kylie turned to face me directly. "Aaliyah, I was wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. And I'm not just apologizing to you, but to every person I've ever looked down on, every employee I've belittled, every life I've touched with my arrogance." Elisa reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. A business reporter stood up. "The stock has dropped 30% since the announcement. How do you plan to stabilize the company?" I gestured to Christiane, who distributed packets to the press. "Inside, you'll find our complete restructuring plan. The merger between Artemis Group and the existing company creates one of the strongest entities in the market. More importantly, it's built on a foundation of transparency." "And the leadership structure," someone else called out. "Margaret and I will co-chair the board," I announced. "Elisa will head our new fashion division. Wyatt will lead international operations. And Kylie—" "We'll be stepping back," Kylie finished. "It's time for new blood, new ideas, and new values." The questions continued for an hour. We answered each one directly, honestly, holding nothing back. As the conference wound down, A young reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Bryant, what would you say to other women facing discrimination and prejudice in corporate America? I leaned into the microphone. Build your own table. They may not let you sit at theirs, but nothing stops you from creating something better. And when you succeed, remember to leave room for others to join you. After the press cleared out, we gathered in the boardroom. The stock had stabilized, ending only 15% down, better than expected. They're calling you the silent queen on social media, Elisa said, showing me her phone. The woman who built an empire in secret while they underestimated her. I prefer just Aliyah, I replied, but I was smiling. Margaret's phone buzzed. The SEC just released their initial findings. Luke's looking at serious time. Sarah's reached out, Kylie said quietly. His other wife, she wants to meet. Wyatt ran his hands through his hair. I still can't believe he had another family. People will surprise you, I said. Sometimes with their capacity for deception, sometimes with their capacity for growth. I looked meaningfully at Kylie. Speaking of growth, Elisa interjected, wait until you see the designs for the new fashion line. Aunt Margaret's been helping me. First, I said, standing up, we need to address the employees. They deserve to hear the truth from us directly. We made our way to the company auditorium, where hundreds of nervous employees waited. As we walked onto the stage, I saw fear in their eyes. Fear of losing jobs, of change, of an uncertain future. Your jobs are safe, I began, and a collective breath of relief filled the room. In fact, we're expanding, but more importantly, you'll now be working for a company you can be proud of. No more hiding, Margaret added, no more fear, no more hierarchy based on anything but merit, Kylie continued. As we laid out our plans, I watched hope replace fear in their eyes. This was the real victory, not the revenge I'd once dreamed of, but the chance to build something meaningful from the ashes of deception. Wyatt took my hand as we finished speaking. Ready for what comes next? I looked at our strange, broken, healing family on stage. More than ready, this is just the beginning. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and fresh pastries through the open windows of my office. On my desk sat the morning's newspaper, its headline still surreal. Corporate Phoenix rises, company value doubles under new leadership. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Christian entered, grinning. The last of Luke's hidden accounts has been cleaned up. It's officially over. Nothing's ever really over, I replied, but I was smiling too. How's the new security system? Impenetrable. No one will be able to hide financial misconduct again. He paused. Luke's sentencing is tomorrow. I know. Wyatt's going. Are you? Before I could answer, Elisa burst in, her arms full of design portfolios. The Paris Fashion Week invitations just arrived, and you'll never believe who's coming with us. Try me, I said, already knowing. Mom! Elisa's eyes sparkled. She's been helping with the designs. Actually helping, not just criticizing. And Aunt Margaret's handling the business negotiations. The door opened again, and Kylie herself walked in, looking different than I'd ever seen her. Gone were the designer suits and perfect coif. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. The models are ready for the final fitting, she announced, and I've been thinking about adding a line for working women. Practical, but elegant. Like you've become, I suggested. She smiled, a real smile, not the society mask she used to wear. I'm learning. Finally. Margaret joined us, tablet in hand. The board meeting's about to start, ready to show them the quarterly results. Actually, I said, I thought you should present them. You've earned it. Her eyes widened. Aliyah, the company was always meant to be yours too, I reminded her. Time to take your place fully. Wyatt appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here you all need to meet. He stepped aside, revealing a woman in her early 30s who shared Luke's features. Sarah, his daughter from his other family. I hope I'm not intruding, she said nervously. Kylie moved first, surprising us all by embracing her. Your family, you belong here. The board's waiting, Christian reminded us gently. Let them wait, I said. This is more important. We gathered around my office's seating area, this strange patchwork family brought together by secrets and lies, but healing through truth. I never thought I'd be grateful for that prenup, I admitted, but it led to all of this. To think, Elisa mused, if Mum and Dad hadn't been so awful to you, we'd all still be living lies, Kylie finished. Sometimes the worst things we do lead to the best outcomes. My phone buzzed. A message from the detention center where Luke was being held. He was asking to see me before tomorrow's sentencing. Go, Wyatt said, reading my expression. End this chapter properly. The detention center was cold and grey. Luke sat at the visitors' table, orange jumpsuit a far cry from his custom suits. You won, he said as I sat down. No one won, Luke, but some good came from it. Sarah, you found her? She found us. She's strong, brilliant, and wants to know her siblings. He slumped. I destroyed everything. No, I corrected. You tried to control everything, and it broke. But we rebuilt something better from the pieces. Why are you here? To tell you that your family is okay. Different, but okay. Kylie is designing clothes with Elisa. Margaret is thriving. Wyatt is the leader he was always meant to be. And Sarah, she's healing too. And you, still enjoying your revenge? This stopped being about revenge a long time ago. It's about legacy now. The right kind. I stood to leave, then paused. The company will support your other family too. It's the right thing to do. Back at the office, I found everyone gathered in the boardroom. The quarterly results were displayed on the screen. Record profits, soaring stock prices, unprecedented growth. To new beginnings, Margaret proposed, raising her coffee cup. To family, Kylie added, in all its forms. To truth, Elisa chimed in. To love, Wyatt said, taking my hand. I looked around at these people who had become so much more than in-laws. To all of it, I said. The good, the bad, the ugly truth, and the beautiful aftermath. Sarah raised her cup too, finally belonging. To second chances. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, we had built something rare and precious. A family forged not by blood or marriage contracts, but by choice and change and challenge overcome. Ready for the board? Christian asked. I squeezed Wyatt's hand and smiled. Ready for anything.